Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rev Real Estate School podcast. Today, we are lucky to have Chris Bello with us. And Chris is a real estate agent. He's an expansion team leader, motivational speaker, podcaster. He's got a long resume. So we're really lucky to have Chris here talking to us about building a real estate business and motivation in general. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Michael? Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be chatting with you because you have such a deep background in real estate, both investing, selling real estate on behalf of clients, and then now also building a podcast and a motivational sphere around you. So really excited to jump into all those topics. But first off, can you walk us through your path and how you got into real estate?
Absolutely. I don't know if a lot of other people can resonate with this concept of doing what your friends did, what your parents told you to do, never really thinking about what you wanted to actually do in the future. But that's what I did. I looked around and I just saw what my friends were doing. And I went to, Texas A&M. We're in Texas A&M University. A lot of my friends went there. And so I'm like, well, what the heck? It's an hour and a half away. I'm close enough to home to be home and get dinner made for me, far enough away to live on campus and have that experience as well. And it wasn't until 3.5 years into a corporate job that I thought was a dream job. I remember being so excited to getting that job where I started to question what do I really want? And there has to be more. And I'm tired of being in this cubicle, having the same conversations, looking at the exact same Excel spreadsheets every single day. And that's what got my gears turning and figuring out how can I escape this and get into entrepreneurship, or it wasn't even real estate, to be quite honest. And we kind of talked about it briefly. I think I mentioned when we had, our last conversation that when I met my fiance, she had met me when I quit my job to put $40,000 into an invention idea, like pretty much most of my savings. I just tried this thing, maybe watched too many Shark Tank episodes or something. And needless to say, didn't really quite work out as I expected, which is entrepreneurship in general. After a few failures and falling on my face a few times, I came across real estate. So it wasn't just like, oh, I was born wanting to do real estate or my parents were in real estate. None of that was the case. I had just heard the idea over and over that 95% of the world's wealthiest people got there through real estate. Everyone needs a place to live, no matter what, whether they're renting or buying. And it seemed like it would make sense just given the skill set that I had been working to build. So hopefully that kind of summarizes how I landed in real estate, even though it wasn't really a straight shot.
It never is. It never is for real
No, it
estate agents.
never
I find
is.
it's never just like I woke up and I knew from day one I was going to be
I
a real
wanted
estate
to be in
agent.
real estate.
Yeah, there's a few people like that. There's very few and far between.
Maybe like a
But
third generation realtor or something,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So you hit the ground running, Chris, and you get your real estate license. And walk me through what you did in that first year or even first couple years in order to start generating business.
Great question. And I will preface that by saying that I was about to try to do real estate wholesaling or investing by myself before I got my license. I did that for a full year and I realized quickly the value of mentors and like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Every time I'd answer a question, two more would pop up. And so I joined a local team for about a year before I got my real estate license. And so when I was sitting there with all the real estate agents who had just signed up and they'd just taken their test, they had no idea. They'd never talking to a seller or anything. I had some experience talking to motivated sellers, going into houses, distressed home situations. And that allowed me to come into it with a confidence, I guess, that a lot of my peers lacked. My first listing was actually someone who I had talked to 4 months prior to give them a cash offer on their house. And it was a little too low for what they were needing. He called me back 4 months later. Hey, Chris, I still need to sell this house. Can you help? And I'm like, well, you couldn't take it at this price, but I can probably list it for you. Does this price work for you? And it did. And that was my first listing. And so the seeds had been planted before I got into real estate, but I had also seen what other successful people do. A lot of networking, shaking hands. We talked about that, recently as well. Conversations, the more conversations that you have, the more money you make, the more sales you make. And that's really how I got started. A lot of relationship based stuff. I never was one to cold call or door knock or any of those things. It was always, let me go make friends with a probate attorney who gets all these deals sent to him. And lo and behold, that's my actual listing that we talked about where I got 27 offers in 3 or 4 days from a contact who I went to high school with, who happens to now be a probate attorney. So relationship-based sales has been a very big part of my business. And when I look back at all the transactions I've done, they've all come from a presentation I delivered at, an investor networking event or something like that about previous experience that I've had.
Amazing. Amazing. I think that probate attorneys agents don't focus on them enough. Like
They
they
don't.
can potentially lead to
They're gold mines.
They are, yeah, and they can be a steady stream of business if we take. I knew another agent who basically exclusively did probate, and he did such a great job of it. But he also just had the relationships with all the probate attorneys,
Right.
and it just led to this steady stream of income for him. It's a different type of transaction, and
It
that's why
is.
these attorneys will oftentimes look to people who have experience doing these types of transactions.
100%. And just relationship based, one other tip that I would mention is if you can find people, loan officers are great at this because they just go after top producing realtors. And let's say you're closing 10 deals a month and you give them a shot and throw them 5 a month, they're building up their recurring income streams from realtors who are actively going out there finding deals. Where I think a lot of agents struggle is that they're going after one-off deals and these transactions don't happen so often, right? I think I'm not sure what the stats are in Canada, but maybe people buy and sell once every 5 to 7 years or so, unless they're investors. And so that's great, but you've got a lot of clients who are going to be staying put for several years. Whereas if you focus on some of these sources, such as probate attorneys or real estate investors, you may have the potential to have multiple transactions in 1 or 2 years. I could think of 2 investors that bought 3 or 4 houses each with me within a 1 to 2 year period from one presentation that I gave on my experience just about finding off market properties, talking to motivated sellers. So I really ran into that with momentum from the previous experience that I had.
That's really, really helpful. Let's dig into that a little bit more. So when
Yeah.
you are, well, actually, even before we jump into, I guess, talking to motivated sellers, you did bring up the fact that when you were building your business, that a lot of that was focused around networking, which kind of sounds like a lot of that was also tied to the investor side of real estate. Is that right? Or were you doing other types of networking as well?
Yeah, a lot of it started from that investor side. I got plugged into different types of events where there'd be a hard money lender and there would be, a contractor over there. They'd all collaborate where they can all share business, right? So people who come in who are either experienced investors or new investors would find all the different vendors to answer questions, but it would also not be too competitive. It was more collaborative. And so I got caught up in that environment, which was very positive of, wow, that investor over there bought and flipped an apartment complex, and that person over there is doing 10 deals a month flips. Very high level individuals where you got to learn and see things differently. So I would credit a lot of my success, I would say, of just seeing a different perspective before getting my license, because I see so many real estate agents who start off as real estate agents. They're afraid to do so many things because they think they're going to get sued or they're breaking the law or they're going to have their license revoked, right? They kind of play very cautiously, understandably, because there's so much regulation in that space, without realizing the potential if you just open your mindset to businesses, even outside of real estate, talking to other business owners. You never know what kind of referrals you can get. Like, for example, the probate attorney, he's not in real estate at all, right? I mean, he actually was hitting me up recently to buy a house. So now he's coming to me for his personal real estate needs, despite the fact that he's already feeding me plenty of listings this year.
Yeah, it's so interesting. If you like look at your deals, and we'll do this every once in a while. We'll look at our deals over
Find
the
the
course of a year.
source.
Yeah, and we'll try and like actually, it's like this web, right? And you transfer
That
it
came
back
from
to this
here.
person and this person. This person came from this, and this person led to a sign call, and that sign call came
Right.
from like it's so interesting,
It's
and that's the
fun.
beauty. Yeah, it's the beauty of real estate. I'm interested though. So you're at these networking events with investors. How exactly are you starting a conversation, or what are you saying to them? Because presumably they know, 15 other agents, if not more than that. So how are you starting that conversation? What are you saying to them?
Yeah. So a lot of people tend to get very interested in just the investment side. I think popular podcasts like Bigger Pockets or even those HGTV shows have made everyone love the idea of being a real estate investor. And the thing is, like I mentioned earlier, most real estate agents who just get into real estate don't know that side. They don't understand estimating the ARV or the after repair value, or doing a ballpark estimate on the repairs, or how do you come in 70% of that ARV minus the repairs. There's all of these different numbers and different formulas that investors use. And so I feel like that was an easy way to differentiate myself, where sure, everyone knows 10 realtors, but how many realtors do you know that got their experience in the investment side first and understand that market and know how to spot and price a deal? Because a lot of times I think us realtors get a hard time of, you guys don't know how to list investment properties. You just slap it up on the market. It's not even a deal. There's no deals on the MLS because they don't know how to price it. So I'd start to lean on that previous experience of I actually do work with a lot of investors. I've got people flipping. I help place tenants for them. I've worked with this reputable company, insert company name. And that would be a way for them to remember me over the 8 realtors they know who just got their license 2 years ago and only do beautiful houses only. So it was just one more way for me to let people know, like, hey, look, if you work with me on your primary residence, or if I help you sell your house, whenever you're ready to jump into real estate investment, I will be your go-to person to be there if you need me. So it was just that option, like that trump card of, I have extra knowledge that most others don't, and you can rely on that if you ever need that down the road. Does that kind of make sense?
I love that. There's a few things that are really jumping out at me. First off, you speak their language, right? Like you're
Yes,
not walking in there with the intention of securing every investor without being able to speak the language that they speak. And that seems
right.
to be at like
Which is
the heart,
important.
super important. Like anytime we're jumping into, like if you're doing a condo sale, you're doing a luxury sale, if you're not speaking that language, it's very hard to secure that client. And then you just dedicated yourself to learning this side of the industry, which then allows you to actually have insightful comments for these people. I think so much in real estate can come from you having just a genuine conversation with a human, but also having some insightful comments. And that's what causes them to be like, oh, that Chris guy, he knows what he's talking about.
Exactly. But also having a position of expertise, if you can get
Mhm.
some stage time, if you can talk about it. I
Yeah.
remember talking at a local investment meetup in the Houston, Texas area. And I just shared, this was kind of when I was transitioning away from the wholesaling team that I was working with to being a licensed realtor. I was in that weird middle period of just having gotten my license, but
Mhm.
also having familiarity with the Texas promulgated contracts and how it works and all those things. And so I just was invited to do a presentation on my experience on finding, locating, analyzing off market deals, talking to sellers. And after doing it with experts for a certain amount of time, you know it, right? And when you teach it, you learn twice type thing. So
Mhm.
I was just teaching stuff that I really knew because I had done it so many times. I had talked to sellers that were in distress and they were 3 months in arrears on their payments and their electricity was cut off while we were under contract. I've seen it all. And from that one conversation, one guy messaged me the next day on Instagram. Hey, Chris, I had the pleasure of seeing you speak at this event. Long story short, I'm looking for a house to house hack for my first primary residence. I want to live in one unit, rent out the other bedrooms. Would you be able to assist me with that? I'm like, absolutely. two
Yeah.
months later, we closed on his first house, and he's since bought many houses with me. I've helped him lease some of them out. And he's like 23 years old. He's an investor that's pretty much financially free almost. I guess his living expenses are completely eliminated because his cash flow is covering them. And he still has the day job. And I've been able to empower him. But where I'm going with that is just if you can speak to people and you know what you're talking about, that's important. You can't just try to like show off in front of a group of people if you don't know what you're talking about. Because if you don't speak their language, they're going to have that red flag go off and they're going to know, I don't think this person actually knows what they're talking about. Right. So that gives you a lot of opportunities because people reach out to you, they want to work with experts. And you're the
Mhm.
perceived expert. If there's 10 realtors in the room, but you're the one presenting, who are they going to reach out to? You.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's such a good point. And then when you're going into these presentations, let's take for example a distressed seller, which I know there's more of these that could end up presenting themselves as interest rates start to rise and time goes on here with inflation. That we could see more of this. So how are you approaching the conversation with a distressed seller, and how are you actually getting that person to then make the decision to list?
So that can be challenging. I was just on a call this morning. They were talking about this as well. Sometimes people bury their head in the sand and they just ignore it, hoping the problem will go away. But the problem becomes ever more present, and foreclosure and all of that can be looming off in the distance. So it's really important to, when you're having these conversations, really dig into the pain points a little bit because they have to understand that they're not in the best spot and that they have to take action to change that situation, right? A lot of times we wish that we can just say, well, okay, you want this price, and if you can't get it, you're not going to move. I've had this conversation with a few people lately as well. Look, if you don't do this, you'll go towards foreclosure. You will not get anything out of this. Whereas if you accept slightly under what you would like to get, you still walk away with money, doesn't affect your credit, and really digging into the why. Like, why is this important to you? What are you going to do with this money when you close? And make sure that they can really paint the picture of the finish line. Imagine how it's going to feel when this weight is lifted off your shoulders. You're out of this property. You get that check at close. What are you going to do with that? Okay, you're going to catch up on your payments over here. You're going to make sure you don't get your truck repossessed, like whatever those things are for that person, talk about those things. But most importantly, what I always hear is that sales should be 80% listening and 20% talking, asking the right questions. Let them vent to you. Let them explain what their situation is. Don't assume you know it all. And when you're listening and taking notes, you realize, okay, like they haven't made 2 months of payments. Like they're not really in a, let me just see what I can get position. They are in a, I need to do something about this position, right? So just understanding their situation fully. And by that, letting them talk most of the time really goes a long way. And asking enough of the prying questions into the why and their motivation, that will uncover quite a bit as well.
I love that. There's a couple of things that really jumped out at me there. First off, of the questions, I think are key, and you're approaching this by way of trying to help them, right? You're not just trying to get the listing; you're trying to truly help the individual. And the other thing that I've never actually asked a client, but now I'm extremely curious. In the next listing presentations I do, I'm going to ask this: say, what are you going to do with the proceeds of this sale? Like, what an interesting way to get them excited about the fact that at the end of this process is likely a check coming your way. So what do we plan on doing with that and getting them excited about the whole thing?
100%. And especially if you're dealing with someone who's in a more motivated situation, or they want to sell, when they uncover their why, whether they're motivated or not. Let's say that they want to sell their house in a certain state and move to be closer to family. You can really harp on that and say, how great is it going to feel when you can just be done with this house? You don't have to fix anything up. You can just sell it as is, never have to mow this lawn again. I'm just thinking of mow. Hopefully you don't hear the guy who just started mowing the lawn out here. But if you can paint that picture for them, it makes it more real, where they're fast forwarded in their mind to, it's going to be so great to not have to fix anything up here or maintain this, or maybe they're in a house that's too big and their kids moved off years ago and it's just this big house that they don't even use most of it. You can paint that picture for them of, we'll get you out of this place. You can go live over there, 10 minutes from your daughter in Florida, have a nice condo with a beachfront view. How great is that going to feel? And most people don't ask that question. You're just trying to focus on the house. It's not even about the house. It's more about that person and their situation. The house is an important piece of that, but really there's motivation behind that we have to uncover, not just, okay, what do you want to list it for? How fast do you want to sell it? Right.
Yeah. And you're also building a personal relationship with them as soon as you start figuring out whys and what they're going to do with things and how it's going to be nice to live close to family. Like, we're getting away from the fact of this is what our commission is and this is what your home is worth. And we're getting towards this is who the person is.
Exactly.
And as soon as that connection is made, these other things don't even become as big of questions. It's like when we have a great connection with that seller, do they object to commissions? Do they object to our pricing? No, because they trust us completely. And that's what you're able to build with questions such as that.
Exactly. And you're really focused on getting them the result or the desired outcome. Again, it's the house is really just a byproduct of that. It's not even, most people focus on the house and they're just talking about, okay, we're going to have to paint this, that color we need to neutralize over here. None of that really matters when you're walking through the house the first time. You're just trying to get to know them, why they're looking to sell. Are they just testing the market, or do they want to go live closer to their, son or daughter? That's a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And on the topic of motivation, now to kind of switch it a little bit towards agent motivation, the reason why I want to ask you about this is because you have a very successful podcast around motivation and mindset for entrepreneurs as well as real estate agents. And so I know that you have a ton of insight around maintaining motivation levels, which is what real estate agents need at times. And so let's say an agent came to you and they said, Chris, I'm not motivated. I'm not able to get my prospecting done. How would you start that conversation with them?
I would ask what they're doing currently. How are you getting motivated, or what kind of activities are you taking? Because that always says a lot. Maybe they're doing it at the wrong time of day. They're trying to make their calls when their energy is the lowest, or when they're not fully woken up yet. Whatever that time looks like, it's going to be different. And if they can surround themselves in the right environment and with the right people, kind of like the co-working space that you and I chatted about earlier on our other show, that's very important, because a lot of people can get energy from the people around them. If you see other people taking action and making phone calls, you're going to do a lot more than if you're just sitting at home alone trying to get motivated. And the way I liken it is, imagine trying to work out at home at a home gym with like 10-pound dumbbells, and you don't even have the full set. You don't even have the bench. You don't have the proper equipment, you're not going to have as great of a workout as if you went to the gym and you saw people who have an amazing physique and gosh, that person's been on the Stairmaster for a full hour and they're still on there. There's a puddle of sweat and they're still on that thing doing the work. You're going to see that other people are taking more action in many cases, and it can help you pull out the extra level inside that you probably didn't even know that you had, right? Because a lot of times we're comparing ourselves versus yesterday. Maybe we made 3 calls yesterday. We thought that was pretty good. And we did 4 today. Okay, we're done. It's not until you see someone who's a top producer who's doing like 100 calls before noon that you're like, wow, my spectrum is off. I'm not measuring on the same thing as this person, right? So get around the right people. That would be my main motivational tip, is that if you're just stuck at home and you're trying to do it all alone, you're probably not seeing what successful people are doing, and you need a mentor. You need somebody around you who can tell you this is a good level of production, or I think you could step it up a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. I love that comment. And motivation comes and goes, right? Like I'm not always motivated. I have days where I'm extremely unmotivated. I feel like a sloth. But when there's a system in place, it's less about motivation. It's more about carrying out a system. And if you just live and die by motivation, like you probably maintain a high level of motivation given your background and given what you're surrounded by. But more of us mortals probably have motivation that can kind of come and go. And so being able, I think, to ride that wave is important, and understand that it's not always about necessarily having the highest possible motivation, like post-seminar motivation sort of thing.
Right. One thing that works really well, I'm a big fan of Calendly, or just having some sort of booking software. I've been using it for a few years and I literally live and die by the calendar. But a lot of times I don't have an option to not be motivated, because I'll send my link out. I'm like, yeah, let's connect. Here's my link. Let's schedule a call. And I may have done 15 or 20 DMs with different people in business groups that I'm in. And this just happened last week. I had 6 people book me for Monday, 15-minute introduction calls to get to know each other. But let's say I woke up on Monday and I'm like, I don't feel like doing anything today. Well, too bad, because my first call starts in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah,
you can't really escape from it once it's on the calendar and locked in. So that's kind of a tip for people, is just commit, add it on your calendar, invite the guest, and you're going to make it happen. So whether or not I felt like doing 2 podcasts today, you and I are here doing 2 podcasts today, right? Yeah. It's been true. Great, by the way. I've loved it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also quite nice, I find, like when you have an appointment with another person. It's one thing when you have an appointment with yourself, that's a lot more easy, I think, to just push to the side. But when you have an appointment with another person, that's why like having a prospecting friend, or coming back to the workout example, working out with somebody else can be so motivating, because you have that level of accountability just baked into the concept itself.
Absolutely. How terrible are you going to feel if you told your friend, let's go work out at 8 a.m. and now you're trying to back out and they're already on their way, right?
Yeah, exactly. You'll hear about it. They'll have some sort of curse word for you.
Exactly.
So what about in the face of rejection? And rejection can really start to feel like that wind's let out of our sails, and that motivation starts to dissipate. So how have you been able to bounce back in the face of rejection?
That's a great question. And it's something that is very difficult to overcome for many people at first, because I mentioned earlier, I'm a people pleaser, right? It's very hard for me to get rejected, and I'm very friendly. Like if I were cold calling someone and they yell at me, I'm like, gosh, in another, if they met me at the grocery store, they'd be best friends with me, or they would be super friendly. It's almost about how you approach them. So I just look at it as a way of, it only takes one yes for success, whatever the numbers are. I saw somebody that I interviewed before had a poster behind him and it said, failure, failure, failure. It had everything in failure, but there was one line that was in gold, and it was kind of a bolded line, and it said, it only takes one yes for success. And just knowing that, okay, no, how many no's does it take to get one yes? And you can kind of work the numbers from there. Maybe it's 50 no's, maybe it's 90 no's. Maybe you get so good that you only get 10 no's before you get one yes. It's about testing the pitch and making sure that the people that you're talking to are the right audience and that you're giving them the right message. And that's kind of how you have to look at it. Make it a game, and it's almost like a game over. Okay, you have another life. I really love what you said. I wrote it down about everything is practice. Just treat it like that and approach it as, but did you die? You know, that one dude from The Hangover or whatever?
Yeah.
You know that movie where he's like, but did you die? That's how you got to look at it, because at the end of the day, it may be uncomfortable to make a phone call, or it may be uncomfortable to make your first YouTube video. But at the end of the day, it's going to take 300 plus attempts to practice to get better at your craft. And you're not going to be perfect every time. You can't make the perfect podcast episode if this is your first episode ever. It's probably not going to be that great. Do it 300
Totally.
more times.
Yeah. Like anybody, please don't order my podcast from oldest to newest and start listening in that direction, because you improve with time. You improve with actually carrying out the action, which is what I'm hearing there, right? Is
Yes.
the
It just
fact that
takes reps.
it takes reps. It takes reps. And I love that concept of eventually you will get to a yes. And that's part of the
Right.
process. So I guess being and knowing that you are a people pleaser, and I would probably put myself in that exact same camp, how have you been able to handle that sort of personality trait, which I think can be very beneficial in real estate, but it can also hurt our potential production and how we go about building our business. So how have you been able to handle that? And maybe let's speak to more of the negative side of people pleasing, which is typically saying yes to every time somebody wants to see a home, or never saying no to a seller, or
Right.
potentially even reducing our, maybe you don't do this, but reducing our commission in the face of a commission objection because we want to please that potential customer. So how have you been able to navigate those waters?
Yes. So those are definitely the negatives of people pleasing, where you have no boundaries and you say yes to too many things that you shouldn't have. And sometimes clients may walk all over you because you allow them to. Right. It's like if you set boundaries for yourself, your phone turns off or goes to do not disturb after 7 p.m. and you don't take calls after that. Respect those. Even if I'll get a text from a client asking a question at like 9 p.m., yeah, I may have read it. I may still be awake, maybe just watching some Netflix with the fiance, but I don't reply to it because that invites them to start the conversation. I leave it unread until the morning, and I'm very strict about these different things. And another way that I have rules in place, right? So I guess I'm very hard about keeping those rules, especially on listings where there's tons of offers and everyone's trying to call me asking for updates, when I specifically outlined in the MLS offer deadline 7 p.m. on this date. We will be reviewing and accepting offers and notifying everyone. I'm very big about not answering all those calls. Hey, can you call me for a quick sec? I'm like, no, I can't, because if I get 15 of these texts and these turn into 5 or 10 minute calls, that's cutting into my personal time and those types of things, right? So living and dying by the calendar. If you have it in your calendar to time block to call everyone back who called you or texted you, go ahead and do that. But for example, while you and I are talking here, I'm not answering any phone calls. I'm not at the gym. I'm here. Wherever you are, be all there. That's a quote that I heard about being present and mindful. And that has helped me just with my mindset of being able to not feel like I am stepping on someone's toes by telling them no, or by not taking their call when they're calling me past my kind of desired work hours. It takes practice. It really does. And saying no at first, it's so tough, where you feel like you're just stabbing them in the soul or something. Have you read the book Essentialism by chance by Greg McKeown? I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but that book really helped me say, when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm saying yes to this 9 o'clock phone call in the evening, I'm saying no to quality time with my fiance. We're both off work, kind of relaxing, had some dinner, watching some TV. That's what I'm saying no to. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
willing to say no to that for a question that probably could be answered over an email the following morning.
That's such a good reminder for everybody to understand that, right? The world's not going to end if we don't get back to them until the next morning. And most
Right.
of the time that's fine. One way that I tend to think about it is early on in your career, you kind of have to say yes to more than you're comfortable doing. Like you have to say yes to more events. You have to say yes to more networking. You have to say yes to more parties. But then
Yep.
as you start to scale into your business, it becomes more about subtraction and what can you take away so that you're able to focus on A, the right activities, but then B, also the right lifestyle.
Exactly.
And there is that balance, which becomes very challenging as a real estate agent, because early on in your career, if you say no to too much, you won't have any business. So you almost have to optimize for yes. And then as you start to scale in your business, you have to optimize for no, which is kind of a tough line to draw, I'd say, for some, myself included.
100%. And your decisions get larger, I guess. Do I want to take this client? Do I just want to refer them out? How much work do you want to do? And you kind of play that game of optimizing your schedule such that you can determine how needy does this client seem to be, and do I have the bandwidth and excitement to actually work with them through the finish line? Or is this a client where maybe we don't have matching personalities and I'd rather just refer them to someone else for a fraction of the commission, but none of the actual work process or showings and things like that. So really just making those decisions for yourself and tuning into your gut. A lot of times your gut's like your second brain, is what I hear a lot of times, where if you just have a bad feeling about somebody or they're kind of already stepping over your boundaries, there may be someone out there who's earlier on in their journey who's willing to say yes to that. But as you progress, that may be something that you're no longer open to saying yes to or accepting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's times where somebody who potentially newer earlier on in their career will have more time, more resources to potentially dedicate to that. And let's say it's a buyer or something like that.
Right. 100%. And I mean, they're hungrier, they're newer, they're just trying to get any deals, right? So they're happy to get your buyer leads from listings, for example, whereas you may be more focused on listings because you get more leverage.
Yeah. And I think this is a good time actually to dive a little deeper into your business model, because you have a unique approach to real estate, and you've actually since moved from Texas to Colorado, right? So
Yeah.
you've made a geographical change, which is like is one of the most challenging things to do as a real estate agent. So can you walk us through, I guess, high level what your business is like and why you made the decision to do this?
So it's funny because we were supposed to go visit Canada in 2020. Of course, we had a wedding scheduled and that didn't end up happening. We ended up coming and visiting Colorado, and we really loved it out here. Just the weather, the mountains, everyone's got dogs. And, we kind of felt like we could fit in with let's go skiing in the winter type thing and then kayaking in the summer. So we kind of moved here spontaneously after visiting in 2020. We just loved it that much. We just decided, let's sell the house and move out here. What the heck? Try some new things out. And I knew in my mind, gosh, my real estate business in Texas is picking up. My network is here. I've been here pretty much my whole life. I went to high school there, middle school. I was there since like pre-K, right? I did the whole thing. So all my sphere, I had so many friends, but I was very intentional about building it in a way where when we moved, I announced it as, hey, we're kind of expanding. I'm expanding into Colorado. I'm not just focusing on Texas alone, but I have boots on the ground there. I have a team there. And using that verbiage and reminding people that I can help has brought business my way. I've helped people buy and sell houses completely remotely, relying on the team that I have there. And I have a listing in Texas. That's the one that I was mentioning earlier, where we had 27 offers, and I've never been to it once. And it's an investment listing that I got from a probate attorney, right? So reminding people in your marketing and in your messaging is key, because most people brand themselves as local real estate agent. I'm a Houston, Texas real estate agent. Well, if I did that, people would never think to call me if they need to move to Seattle or they want to buy in Florida, right? So I'm losing out on referral opportunities there. But by reminding people constantly, I've been just saying I can help you buy or sell real estate anywhere. People come to me with any real estate question they have. And that's where I can direct referrals as necessary. I can decide to work with a client directly if it makes sense for me and if I'm willing to take that on. So I've been very big on the referral model too, because like we discussed, I am the host of a podcast. I was able to pass, I think, 1 million downloads a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I can't remember exactly when I passed that line, but I've been able to capitalize on referrals from my audience by just kindly reminding them every now and then, hey, if you need to buy or sell, if you need any help, go to this URL and I'll be able to direct you accordingly. And so there's a lot of opportunities there, but just thinking creatively and outside the box. Hopefully that kind of answers the question in a way where I'm just the catch-all. Come to me with real estate questions and either I can help you or I will find someone who can. And of course I can collect a referral commission upon closing, which is really a neat way to monetize those.
So in such an underutilized way to monetize your real estate license. So this actually begs a number of questions for you, but the first one that's coming to mind is seller says to you, hey, Chris, I understand you're in Colorado. My house is in Texas. How is this going to work? How am I going to get Chris level service when you are not in my state?
That's a great question. And I do tell my clients in the presentation via Zoom, hey, by the way, fun fact, I actually am no longer in Texas, but I handle their objections up front. I show sales and reviews. These are houses that I've closed. Here's 5-star reviews that I've gotten from clients that I was able to assist while I was gone. But I do have my boots on the ground people. I've got showing agents. I've got an amazing transaction coordinator. And most recently, my younger brother was able to get his real estate license out there. So I'm like, he's like a mini me. You pretty much get me 4 years younger, maybe a little bit lazier if my brother listens to this. But he's an extension of myself and my business in Houston in a way where they still get that level of service. It still is a Bello, they're getting like a Cody Bello instead of the Chris Bello, right? Close enough, right?
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
processes and the systems is what I really harp on in a way of, look, these are all the sales that I've had completely remotely. By the way, here's my happy 5-star client reviews. So that right there nips it in the bud where they're not as concerned because they're like, oh, it's no big deal. He's been doing this before. He has people who are on the ground who host his open houses, who place signs and lock boxes and do all those things for him. And he's just the master at running the CMAs, pricing it correctly, marketing it effectively to get traffic through there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the systematization of it is key, but then the social proof that you're leaning into is
Social
also
proof's
really
huge.
helpful. And then, so how are you going about, so if you are basically able to help people transact anywhere in a lot of ways, right? Like you might be based in Colorado, but you can help somebody transact anywhere within the US, really, even could extend beyond the US. But how are you going about actually generating leads from anywhere, which seems to be almost more challenging, right? Because they could come in from anywhere. So we don't necessarily have like one pod of potential buyers and sellers.
Yes, that is the challenging part. I have updated my bio on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. My kind of one sentence takeaway is I can help you buy or sell RE anywhere, like real estate anywhere. And I think I have a little house emoji so people can really see anytime they see a piece of content from me, anytime they see a post on LinkedIn, that line is flashing across their screen. So they may receive that piece of information at a point in time where they have a question. And perfect recent example, I had a person I used to work with in my corporate job who reached out to me. The story was that he had relocated to Houston from Mexico right shortly after buying a house in Mexico. And so I had met him in Houston. We worked together. He was originally from Monterey. He just rented that house out for the last several years. And this must have been, I probably met him back in 2013. So coming up, almost 10 years here. And the power is that he reached out to me saying, I've got this house in Mexico. I need to sell it. Can you help me out? And that's where I went to work. It's like a chicken and the egg situation. I can't predict where the leads will come from. But once they do, I tap into my sphere and other referral agents that I know. And I ask in Facebook groups, for example, hey, does anyone have any solid agents in Monterey, Mexico? Or I can even use the search feature to find out posts from previous agents. And let's say 10 people tag a certain agent who's the go-to in that market. That's social proof for me of, okay, this person has lots of people vouching for them. It's worth a conversation. Let me talk to them on Zoom, fill them in on the situation, and then make the connection and then kind of just check in from the sidelines every once in a while. So I've had that situation come up. It is a little bit challenging because I really never know. Is someone going to move to a random state I don't know anybody in, or are they selling outside the US? That's been a little bit challenging, but I've just continued to remind people, if you have any real estate questions, let me know, and I can connect you with professionals in your area if I can't help you myself. So education and marketing is key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the communication around that too, which
Right.
I want to jump into. But right before we jump into that, from a percentage standpoint, what percentage of your business would you say is Houston versus the rest of the world?
I'd say Houston's definitely still very large just from the groundwork that I've put in. I had gone to so many networking events and talking to people, building relationships. I have realtors who every time it floods in Houston floods quite a bit, just different storms and things like that. They'll message me, I've got 2 houses that flooded. Can your investors buy it? So I'm literally getting leads from the groundwork that I have done over the years. So I would probably say 80% is still Houston at the moment. I did get licensed in Colorado, but I haven't been super active. I've already referred 2 buyer leads to another realtor who I know is ready to play that game and show houses and do multiple offers over asking price. So I'm really leaning on the referral model at the moment. So even within Houston, I'd say probably 60% of my business I have referred out, and I've been working with the 40% and cherry picking the listings that I do want to take, referring out the rest. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of a breakdown. Just really tapping into the lifestyle. I'm big on lifestyle freedom, time freedom.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you starting to build that out. And then I think another important part of one's business that agents tend to not think about being a lead generation strategy is this concept of referrals and the back and forth between referrals. So for example, if I send a referral to somebody in Houston and that agent doesn't do a good job or doesn't keep me up to date, I'm much less likely to continue to send referrals. And then I'll get agents from, my office and say, hey, someone's moving to Houston. who should I refer to? And I'll say, well, don't refer to
Don't go to that
XYZ.
person.
Yeah. So it can actually end up being an amazing lead generation strategy for agents if they know how to work it right, or it can actually end up hindering their business. So with that said, what are some traits of somebody, if an agent listening to this receives a referral or even sends a referral, what's that communication style like? How can that agent ensure that they're going to be top of mind for that agent moving forward for future referrals?
I would definitely say to keep them up to date on how things are going, let them know you received the lead, you were able to connect with them. Maybe tell them how it's going to work. Similarly to setting expectations with clients, say every Friday, I'll just send you a quick little 1 or 2 sentence update on how things are going. And if you have any questions, reach out at any time. Because I think where a lot of people drop the ball is that they just ghost you. You don't know, did they talk to the lead? Are they looking at houses? Did you list a house if they're a seller lead? You really never know. And then it's kind of your job at that point. It's very frustrating to have to follow up and chase people who you gave a lead to see how things are going. So if you are on the receiving side, it goes a long way. I had one agent who did a great job with a buyer lead. I sent him in Seattle. He let me know how he was going to communicate with me. He kept me updated. He told me the title company, all the information so that I could give them what they needed to pay me my referral commission. And he's going to be my go-to person for anyone I know moving to Seattle, right? He did a great job. But alternatively, those who ghost me and never did anything and they didn't really follow up with the lead, or worse, they burned the relationship with the lead and never told me, I have to find out from the lead. That's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. And like you mentioned, I'm going to warn people to not send people to that person because it was a terrible experience for the client and they lost a deal or lost the client earnest money or whatever the situation may be. So be responsive and communicative and tell people how you're going to communicate with them and stick to that. That's my tip.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think we overcomplicate it too. Like you can open up an Excel or Google Sheets doc and like agent that referred, client name, agent's email. And then like you're saying, Friday, block off 15 minutes to update. And you will notice an immense number of referrals coming your way as an agent if you really start to work that system. And all it is keeping people up to date with what's going on, which seems so simple, but that's really what you were doing. You're not like the agent's not working any magic other than just communicating with you and with the lead, of course.
And building an email list also, that's so important. I think so many agents do a bad job of it, or they're just sending these copy and paste templates that every other agent's also sending in your market. Send real emails as if you're writing to a friend, and you'll be surprised at how long you can nurture these leads and they'll come back to you 2 years later.
Yeah, it makes a huge, huge difference for sure. Chris, as we're starting to wrap up here, I have another question for you just around what you see real estate agents doing on a regular basis that you think they shouldn't be doing. So oftentimes, I know we've talked a lot today about things that agents should be doing, but is there anything that comes to mind that agents shouldn't be doing, or things that you see in the industry that you're like, I really wish agents wouldn't do this because it would have a positive impact on their business?
So I think it's a little bit, maybe it depends on the agent's view, because I'm very big on not answering every single phone call all the time, which I know is kind of frowned upon in the industry. A lot of people say, answer your phone, answer every single phone call. Like you need to be doing a great job for your clients. But that really cuts into, if it's in your time block, if you have a 2-hour session for answering phone calls, returning phone calls, do it. But what gets people in trouble is that they can't even jump on a Zoom call on time for meetings because they're, sorry, I'm still in these showings. You know, they're not delegating effectively. So what I see a lot of agents doing that they shouldn't be doing is that they're trying to do everything and they're not leaning on automation or delegation. I'm really big on telling people to do that. Find people to do your showings for you on a Saturday so that you can sit there and time block and call all your leads back or whatever, or do 2 podcast conversations, right? Time block effectively. And if you can rely on other people, you don't have to be feeling pressured to do everything on your own, answering all the phone calls, sending all the emails, filling in all the paperwork, right? Having a transaction coordinator and a few showing agents, that eliminates a lot off of your plate so that you can focus on working on the business rather than just in it, which is what most agents do. The E-Myth is a great book that talks about it. Don't be the bakery owner who used to love baking and now you're in the business and you would have been better off just working at a bakery because now you can never unplug. Too many agents do that. So that's what I would just mention, just outsource and delegate whatever you can.
Really, really good point. And so many resources out there for agents to actually do that. I know oftentimes we feel, and I'm like this too, oh, I could do that faster. I could do that better. So I'm going to do it. Yes, the answer to both of those is yes, you could do it faster. Yes, you probably could do it better. But again, you're saying yes to something, which means you're saying no to something else. And so sometimes we have to be okay with our team learning how to do things and giving them opportunities to grow and to improve in order for us to then focus on other things as well.
100%.
Awesome, Chris. Okay, so just to wrap things up here, where can people best reach out to you and learn more about you, send referrals your way, as well as, of course, be able to log in and tune into your podcast?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So chrisbello.com is my website. And if you go to chrisbello.com/links, that'll show you like my link tree, all my social media handles, how to check out my podcast. It tends to be the easiest way. In terms of social media platforms, I'm most active on Instagram. So chrisbello_ is the best place to find me on there. But really, you can find it all if you just go through chrisbello.com, BELLO. And Michael, I appreciate you having me on. I had a fun conversation, and it's just really cool to connect with like-minded people that are building up businesses and other people, most importantly, to leave more of a legacy.
You bet. This was super fun, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.